Welcome to the Dudes of Thread podcast. The Dudes of Thread podcast is here to open your mind when it comes to specialty embroidery, applique, patchwork, and multimedia. From ideation to design to sourcing, we want to help you help your customers elevate their merchandise.
We've done the research, made the mistakes, and are excited to share this nerdy fashion content. Join us as we decorate our way to creativity, one stitch at a time.
Welcome to the Dudes of Thread podcast, where we talk about all things specialty embroidery, applique, multimedia. We're here to help you elevate your embroidery game and push away the basic embroidery and step it up to have something super creative. The goal for this podcast is to open your mind when it comes to embroidery and patchwork and applique, different techniques that you can help your customers elevate their merchandise. Our audience is from screen printers, embroiderers, distributors in the promotional product space, manufacturers of all kinds, or even clothing brands looking to elevate their game using embroidery.
We're here to show even the smallest embroidery factory what you can do to elevate that level of creativity for your customer.
You're right, there's so many different stitches, thread types, applications that people can utilize that they don't need new equipment. They just need a new mindset of how to design for embroidery and then how to work with their production department to execute it. And we're going to help you solve all those problems.
I absolutely love what you just said about mindset, because that's really one of the biggest hurdles that I've experienced in my 29 years doing this, is that people think commonly that getting something other than direct embroidery or just direct screen printing is going to take and require this massive amount of knowledge and this huge library of all kinds of skill sets. And the fact of the matter is, you're already doing it. You just don't even know it yet. Most of your, the factories out there, it doesn't matter if you're a small factory, you only have a single head or maybe a 6 head. You can do all these really fancy techniques. You just have to open up your mind a little bit more and understand that these are things that can really be done. And I know there's going to be a little bit of, development time on the front end, but I promise you, each time you do it, you're going to cut that development time in half and offer your customers a really wide library range of complicated techniques that you'll be proud to show, and you're really upping yourself with the competition around you.
Again, we're here. We're going to bridge the gap between the technical and the commercial, and how the different departments can work together to elevate your merchandise. And so sit back, relax, and pull up a needle and thread, and let's stitch this sucker up.
Let's stitch it up. That's a great comment. I love it. So one of the projects that really comes to mind when we're talking about multimedia and elevating that game is a project that Jeremy and I got to work on together, called, we like to call it our Orchid Hoodie. And I would like to let maybe Jeremy tell us a little bit about the origins before we get deep into the techniques.
Yeah, so being able to come up with a fresh design, there's a lot of different approaches that you can take. You can start with just the straight up idea or the design. You can know what technique that you want to do for your garment. Or 3, you see a cool garment and then you try to design for that garment. So that's, on this case, the latter is what we started. We saw the Orchid Hoodie from Lane 7. We really liked the unique colorway. It was a little bit washed out. I'm not usually wearing a pinkish purple, but the shade it has that vintage feel to it. So we selected the garment, and then we kind of worked our way through it of, all right, are we gonna screen print this, embroider it, put applique on it? And when we were brainstorming, Angelo, the designer, we started doodling, and we thought, let's do this like hand sketched notebook, like you were in junior high, scribble, and then let's layer it with different inks and then add embroidery on it to strategic locations just to bring out the design and give it depth. And we really, we evolved along the way. We changed it a couple times, but going from, the sketch to the end development, it was a fun journey.
That's awesome. So one of the things that stuck out that you just mentioned was the inks. And I think we should dive into that real quick, because it's actually a really small segment that we can talk about here about inks. Yeah. And one of the things I really liked about this project was that we allowed our our screen printer to take a little bit of creative liberty and help us with the best formula for what we like to call tonal print. So we want to take in other words, we want to take the garment color and shift it lighter. We want to take the garment color and shift it darker without calling out a specific PMS. And this is achieved very simply by just using a base. So a plastisol base that actually has the ability to go transparent is basically what that is. So
it starts off clear, right?
Exactly. It starts off kind of clearish looking, almost like if you were to print it. You know how like when you wet fabric, that fabric gets dark. You could see that it's wet. And so that's kind of what it would do. Not all fabric does this, but a lot of fabrics do, especially pigment dyes. They have a way to look a little bit darker when you put clear over the top of them. So what we did was we actually mixed in a portion of white ink into that clear to shift this orchid color a little bit on the lighter side. And then of course we did the same thing to shift it to the darker side. Now, from a chemistry standpoint, obviously that becomes a little bit challenging because you're trying to figure out what was the ratio and percentages of what you used, how much of the actual white plastisol you used versus the clear. But once you get it, and you mix, a gallon of it or whatever, you could use it down the line. So it's not like, one mix is only good for one garment.
Yeah.
That's basically, it's diluted pigment that we screen print in there. And the best part about it is because it is a soft base, I think we originally called out chino base, but there's derivatives of those. Chino is kind of an older product, but it still is something you could order today. But some of these derivatives are just as good. But what I really like about that chino base is incredibly soft. And it doesn't matter. You almost forget that it's plastisol because it comes in so soft. So that's one of the really awesome positive things about this piece was the ink that we used. And of course, I believe it's just wet on wet, which is one pass of the light, one pass of the dark, and that's it. That's all we used.
Yep. Another benefit, I think, is once you dial in that formula, you can use it on a multitude of garment colors. It might not work for every garment color, but if you're coming out with a line and you don't want new setups or a new design, you can test the same design, same ink formula on multiple shirt colors, and it gives you a little wide spectrum to be able to offer your clients or your team. And the great part, it looks almost like a completely different design, but again, it's the same inks, tonal dark, tonal light. We use a lot of tonal dark as like background pieces or something that we want super subtle, maybe on the sleeves. But I love it because no matter if you're using a tri-blend or a poly cotton or 100% cotton, it can still look really nice on all different types of garments. So it allows you to experiment with some of your styles before you go all into like, this colorway did the best on this style. It's a good starting point to experiment and just to give people different options, but still remain on brand.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's an absolutely great point. And speaking of remaining on brand, there's a little touch, and I don't know if you in the audience have been able to pick this up, but we really love this. I didn't catch on it right away, but I knew what it was. I just never seen this used in a branding, technique. But I really dig, Jeremy, the 306 direct embroidery on here. And if you haven't caught on yet, folks, that is the PMS color of Jeremy's brainchild from his dreams of putting together, his Amber Creative brokerage firm to begin with. And I've never seen that done in design before, or at least it's not common. So I definitely want to point that out, that is a very creative touch to put the 306 direct embroidery right in the design. And it's funny, I think we got some comments too, like people asking if that's like an area code. We're like, no, Denver's 303.
Or phone number. Area code. Exactly. Well, I think the fun part about that is, what we're trying to do, we're trying to support creatives. We want to help people within the industry increase their knowledge. And, we're nerds. We talk about this stuff even on our downtime. So being able to throw little design quirks in there, that a lot of designs you might see have no purpose for them. You know, we want to at least throw in some little nuggets of things that are important to us. And, you know, with a 306, it just allows us to test it out with all different ink types, you know, not only the color, but the thread as well. So that's the exciting part. And, you know, it's even though Pantone has left our industry slightly, we still rely on them, and 306 isn't going anywhere. So.
Exactly. So I think I'd like to at least take away that one aha moment here, one light bulb moment for us, okay, is that we're using the tonal ink technique, right, with our Geno base, with our soft base to do the ink. The second one I really want to point out that I think really stands out here, and I just love this part of every time we do direct embroidery over the top of screen print, is that we specifically design the embroidery so that if it's a little bit off, when you go to hoop it, it doesn't matter. And that is a technique I want, that's the mind-opening technique that I'd like every shop to understand, is that you can put embroidery over the top of screen print. Just don't try to design it as such to where if it doesn't line up, it looks like a mistake.
Yeah.
So
and it will look like a mistake.
And it will.
You know, that's with our design style on this, you know, it was very raw and organic, and it really yielded well to the different stitch types, which you can talk about in a few minutes, that we used on the garment. But again, the registration, give some grace to your teams to where they're not like stressing out to, like, you know, slow down production and try to match it up. Make it in a way that it just complements, even if it floats around a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I think the most crucial part of this was getting the vendor on board, our screen print and embroidery vendor, to understand that it doesn't need to be perfect, but we just want to make sure that our corporate image lines up with the center of the printed skull as best it possibly can. If we have a couple, I think, smiley faces with crowns in here as well. One of them has, I think, a 2-pass zigzag over the top of it, and the other one I think is just either 2-pass running or a bean. I don't remember exactly which one we did, but if those don't line up perfectly, it's okay. We wanted it to look artsy and fun and have a little bit of a looser feel to it. I mean, you can see in the artwork itself, like, there's just so much going on, but it's only 2 colors of ink. But then when you add this extra embroidery in here, it just really livens things up a lot.
Yeah. What stitch did you use for the 306? Was it a fill stitch or?
Yeah, so the 306 was actually in the past I've heard it called a whip stitch. It's basically a 3-pass or a multiple pass satin stitch with jagged edges is basically what it is. So where you would normally have just one thread, you know, jumping across to create, you know, a width of the number in this case, there's actually 3 passes. Or if you wanted it even chunkier, you could go 5 passes depending on the thickness of your thread. Wow. So it's basically a 3-pass
in the same hole, right?
That is correct. They'll just hit the same holes and leave multiple passes in there. What it really does too is it allows the machine embroidery to achieve a very hand sewn look, almost like if let's say your mom or your grandma was you know, or granddad or my father, but they would sit there with a needle and maybe some nice luxurious yarn and actually hand sew it by hand. That's kind of what the whip stitch is trying to emulate. But of course, with machine embroidery, you know, you're running at 700 or so RPM. You can pound out a file like this very, very quickly and don't have to sit and hand sew it. But that's the whole point of that whip stitch technique, and that was used as well on the main A for amber there on the skull, the center of the skull. And I believe we put a tonal. Did we put a shadow behind that? I think we did.
Maybe there was an outline of it.
Yeah,
you know, like in the sketch from the Procreate.
But it was a really fun project to use. I think on this project we had ordered. And let's talk about threads really quick, because I feel like this is a very underutilized technique in a lot of shops. I think we ended up using poly thread on this one because our cotton wrapped threads, our sewing threads, had not arrived yet. So Just for all the shops out there that are listening, sewing thread is a far superior thread. Sewing as in construction sewing, not
Yeah.
embroidery sewing.
What they're
Uh,
using here, right, on
yeah,
garments.
yeah, and that's not to put down the manufacturers that make embroidery thread. It's that's not it. It's just it's a different tool in the toolbox, and I'd like for all those shops out there to understand that you can absolutely use sewing thread. It's actually stronger. It has a stronger tensile strength. It has far less shrink factor, and this is a huge one
Interesting.
because um, I believe, so I remember my stats here correctly, but a lot of polyester and rayon threads has anywhere between a 7 and 10% shrink allowance in
Wow.
post, meaning that once it's manufactured, they don't treat the thread any more than sewing threads actually treated more. They put them in these, like they call them gray spools. Gray spools are the spools before they dye them.
Okay.
And so they have this huge, racks and racks and racks of these gray spools. And with once they get the yarn spun down to a gray spool in embroidery land for embroidery thread, they just dye it and ship it out, and whatever the shrink rate is, it is. They assume that the interfacing is going to hold it from, doing that puckering that you see sometimes after a wash. And they
Yes.
just assume it's fine. And for most shops, it's fine. Not talking trash. That's just a different tool for a different purpose. But with the sewing thread, there are so many of these gray spools that go into, I think, like a 400-degree oven for like 2 days or something like that. And
Wow.
what it does is it helps to reset the molecular structure of the fibers as they've been all twisted up, and it allows them to, under tension, to now be relaxed. And so they take those spools, then they go dye them. Then, of course, they can go out to production. And it's just so amazing to see. We used to take the same exact file and take it to embroider it. And we would use wash away backing, because wash away backing is one of the most vulnerable backings you can use. Vulnerable because it's very thin when you're actually sewing something, when you're sewing a file. And what that means is that it's not like a thick, like, for example, if you have a really thin polyester polo, you end up having to overcompensate for a thicker piece of, cutaway backing that may not be desirable on the inside of the shirt. However, if you take that cutaway and you get a thinner cutaway, or maybe go to a tearaway, you actually risk a little, bit of distortion and buckling, and a little bit of that, we just kind of call it bacon. Sometimes it looks like,
Yep.
get a little bit of that bacon look to it, because the
Wavy.
interface can't hold, that fabric is just so thin, and the interface can't hold it. So talking about sewing threads, and just say a piece of, fabric jersey, we actually took a small hooped a 4.3 ounce jersey. Let's say it was a blend of some sort, maybe even a tri blend. Put that wash away backing on the back, hoop it, throw it in there, run a graphic, let's say like this 306, and then go and take it, put it in the wash. It comes out just beautiful and amazing, and you could just see how it just looks so much more hand done, and you don't feel anything on the inside of the shirt. So that's a big one. Sewing thread won't shrink and cause that puckering to happen typically. So that's something to think about.
Love that. And with sewing thread, it's typically more matted, right? Matte
Ooh, that's a great point. Yes. So
versus the poly thread is
absolutely, it's going
a
to be
little
shiny.
shiny, which we used we wanted the matted look or the muted look, but it didn't work out. But it's still, again, it gives a nice pop. So depending on the design, opening the options of threads really helps you to make the perfect garment.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Is that that's the number one thing you can notice too on whether or not a fabric has got some embroidery on it, and whether or not that embroidery is shiny or dull. Hey, one's going to be the construction thread, which is dull, and the shiny one's going to be embroidery thread, which is got that sheen to it. And I think there's one in the middle, but I can't remember exactly what. It's like a silky. It's not quite shiny, but it's not quite dull. It's some kind of in the middle. But I haven't used too much of that. But
Yeah, I know Madeira, right? They have their frosted. That
Yeah.
kind of seems
Absolutely.
It still looks synthetic, it doesn't have the fuzzies that maybe the sewing thread has, but I haven't dealt with it, but I'd like to try. We should probably do that on a future
Mhm.
episode and sew out, the same logo with 3 different threads just to
Absolutely.
show people the difference.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. So everything that we did here was done on just a normal, I think it was like a 6 head or 12 head Chijima,
Yep.
and it was normal, I believe, approximately. I think they were like 11 by 11 hoops, so nothing was out of sorts. So it was a
And
great.
yeah, so we fit all the graphics right on one
Yep.
hoop.
Yep. Didn't
Didn't
have
have
to
to
hoop
have
it.
multiple locations. Again,
Yep.
you know, we like to talk about all this awesome tricked out stuff, but at the end of the day, we still have to make it affordable. We have to make sure production, can do it in a streamlined way. But from your experience in your past, it can be done. So, like opening this conversation for people not only to learn what else is out there, but to find ways to up the merchandise instead of basic screen print or basic embroidery. They can do so many things and not kill the budget. And the wearer really can tell that it's different and unique than the run of the mill corporate embroidery.
Yep, that's absolutely true. In fact, right now I was as we're talking here, I was trying to find that file because I wanted to report exactly how many stitches I have in that file here, that we did for that orchid hoodie, because it wasn't much. I think it was like 4 or 5 thousand stitches. So it was a very very modest amount of stitches for the effect that we got from this hoodie. What a piece though! Just really impactful piece. Super
And it
fun.
was selfish. We made it for ourselves, and then giving them away to friends and clients and acquaintances, that we meet along the way.
Yes.
But really, a lot of it is, hey, we are usually B2B helping our customers create their brands, but we end up neglecting ourselves. So this whole year, we've been on a journey to come out with our own stuff, develop it from the get-go, design it for the production aspect, and really journal it along the way so we can share our concept to wearing it. So
Yeah, exactly. And so I think another thing I wanted to discuss a little bit, because I think this is another issue that kind of gets brushed under the rug a little bit, is costing for something like this.
yeah.
If you're a shop, what do you charge? If you're if you're the wholesaler, you're trying to buy it, what do you expect to pay? You got 2 colors of screen print on here, so that's a pretty standard chart going across the board here. 2 colors, no flash. I believe
No
it's wet on
base.
wet.
Yeah.
No base. Yeah, exactly. So that could not be more of a inexpensive technique. And the beauty of this technique too, and I think this should resonate with everyone, is that just because this particular garment was orchid doesn't mean you couldn't have different colors of garments in the same order with the same screen print colors. So it could be navy and still look like it's taken on some of these colors. Obviously the black would get lost, the darker tonal navy would get lost, but you could have sage in this color, you could have a mustard in this, and it all will work just fine. But I think the cost of the embroidery, obviously it's just a separate cost just to hoop it. So I mean, that's going to be, I'm guessing, depending on quantity, $7-8, something like that for embroidery, plus several dollars for screen print. So you're what, $11-12 or something like that all in with this, plus maybe an hour's worth of development on the artist side to get something like this going.
Yeah, and for us, I think luckily our clients aren't as particular on the cost, especially when they're wanting something new and fresh and cool.
Super custom. Yeah.
But I think if you look at screen print graphics, you have a front left chest, 3 or 4 colors, back 3 or 4 colors. You're going to get this garment that we just did probably at the same or cheaper than doing, all these multiple colors. It's not like, hey, let's just take a graphic from the computer and put it on a garment. We like to think, and we want to help others think in layers, and how can we design and find the right production for that garment so it's all looks authentic. It's not, I hate when I see like a nice vintage tri-blend shirt and then they screen print this thick opaque design, and it's like it completely kills the point of having this vintage garment. So throughout this, and we'll be doing a segment that people can send in their artwork and we'll give them suggestions, but really a lot of it is knowing what's out there and then you really thinking through every project. Some of them are straightforward, left chest embroidery or one layer applique, but for those customers that deserve your extra time and they have a big audience and you want to develop extra for them, just with embroidery and applique is a great way to just take their merch to a new level, especially if they're just used to screen print or used to, basic embroidery. Bringing in patches and applique and multimedia, the client's going to love it. They can sell it for more. And us as the manufacturer B2B, we're going to be able to put a few more points to our margins, which everyone can be happy.
Everyone's going to be happy about that. I mean, absolutely. In fact, I was just thinking about the sleeve prints that we did. Not only did we do a sleeve print, but each sleeve was different art also.
Yep.
We have, I think, one lightning bolt that had a little bit more darkness to it, and one lightning bolt was a little bit lighter. So that's going to add, a few bucks more per sleeve. Yep. For a quantity like that. But anyway, that's the core of how we layered this all together was, screen print and then embroidery over the top of it. That was, loosely registered, if you will, so they could still move quickly in production. Your vendor will thank you for it. Of course, your production, if you're a production shop, your production staff will thank you for it because they don't, have to sit there all day trying to line one shirt up. But
to top it off, because we like to go a little extra, the inside woven tag, super dry is, I love all of their garments. They explore every technique in the book when it comes to decoration, and their large oversized inside neck tags is another way just to not only charge more, but just make it look like a higher end garment. Even though it was off the shelf blank, we private labeled it, and our inside, as you can see here, we almost went for a photorealistic image. It took a few times to get it's actually woven, and so it took a few times to get the pixelization right of the sculpture there. But that inside neck tag gets just as much hype as some of the garment. People love that aspect of it, and just little techniques of like when your embroiderer or seamstress is sewing it down, the bobbin thread needs to be the color of the garment, unless you want it contrast. But for us, we wanted to make it to where you couldn't see the big rectangle on the outside of the back. We made sure the bobbin thread was matching the shirt as close as possible, so we could just work through that and make it look really fresh, like it was cut and sew, even though it was off the garment.
What an awesome piece. I love. Is that are we referencing Venus in there? With the art, it's so awesome.
Yeah, it was just some Roman sculptor, bust or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so awesome, and I love the way that the colors really bounce off that orchid color as well. Just has a really nice impact for fashion, and we're gonna roll some of these nice slow. I think I did some camera slider slow mos. With that in a previous video, so we're gonna roll that as well. But this is just such a fun project for this orchid hoodie. What a piece. So hopefully our audience got to learn a few things and have a little more courage when creatively thinking outside the box here.
Yeah, and experimenting is great, especially when it's your company merchandise. You're not risking it, just like trying it out for a customer and you've never done it before.
One of the things that I really think is something we need to cover also, especially for the greater good, and I'm going to continue to cover this in this series, is how to hire a digitizer, especially for something like this. Um, when you go to look for a digitizer, you're really looking for compatibility. I mean, just like, chemistry is everything. Good relationship, a good portfolio is a good place to start. There's some levels of caution, and I think that one of the biggest levels of caution is there's a lot of digitizers out there that don't have an embroidery machine on site, and that's a big one, because if you don't have an embroidery machine on site, you're basically taking a file that they think is going to be the best for your, machine, fabric, thread density, embroidery complexity of the design, and they're going to try and basically make you become the guinea pig to try it out, and offer you a couple of free edits, along the way. And really what that's going to do is going to waste your time, especially if it's a file that's 10,000, 15,000, and I mean, hopefully not 20,000 stitches, and you're running at, even if you had a machine that's running very briskly at 700-800, that's still going to be, that could be a 25 to 30 minute run, meaning that for every amount of heads you have, you're only cranking that number amount out every 20 or 30 minutes. And that is not good when you could be doing a 5 or 6,000 stitch file and cranking out, three runs an hour or 4 runs an hour, and that's where the money's made. So I think that's probably like the biggest one, is to make sure they actually have a machine, on the premises, that they could sew it out, send you the DST that you need, but also send you the scan image of it to make sure that this is what you want and it's on similar fabric. Always a really important thing. Number 2 thing is definitely going to be the portfolio. I have seen, and I really want Jeremy to help out with this one because it's a very interesting topic. I've seen some amazing work out there. If you're a digitizer out there, you're offshore, I'm not putting you down. It's just you guys have amazing portfolios. The downside is that's not an everyday realistic case for what we at least deal with in daily production here, in the States.
Yeah.
It's a big deal because, I mean, I've seen these files, 100-something thousand stitches. They're lining the insides of Bentleys or something just ridiculous with embroidery. That's all great, but we're not looking for that kind of, embroidery. We're looking for, hey, how can we make this? I mean, I'll bring this up too, because I know that a lot of factories and small shops, medium shops, even big shops, they struggle with this exact same issue. How to get letters to just look straight and just look good and clean. A big battle is just, how do we get it to look? And it's so funny, right? I mean, Jeremy and I worked on a lot of, I'll post some images here as we're talking. Jeremy and I worked on a lot of very simple, just all caps, 4 letters, should be simple, right?
Yep.
The fabric we put it on, it was a nightmare. It was nothing but problems.
Yeah, your file, the final digitized file looks whack. Like it looks horrible, as far as like, that's crooked, that's squeezed. But just from your experience of how it actually sews and how the fabric moves, to get from that file to actually sew straight on the garment is like magic. It's it threw me off at first. I'm like, I thought you were a pro, Joe.
Yeah, I know.
And then when it came out, it came out looking better than what even the embroiderer could do with, having everything live and in person.
Yep.
But it just goes to show, there's complexities no matter what the art could be. It's just the fabric, the letters, the size, the spacing, so many variables to mess up an embroidery.
Right, exactly. So it's just something to consider, that especially if you're a digitizer trying to help from offshore, that is the everyday embroidery help that most people need. Is just the letters need to look good. And if you're a shop, you've got a customer base, I think that it goes without saying that any letter less than, let's say, 0.2, some shops even say 0.25, like a 1/4 inch tall, we just can't guarantee it's going to come out. And it's just, I get small embroidery sent to me all the time where people like, can you please put 30 something letters across the front of this hat? And I just tell them, please don't do that to yourself.
Yeah.
You know, is there any way we could just do an abbreviation, or is there anything we could do to knock some of this stuff down and it still be, license friendly, or, something in that realm of comfort? Because, man, I'll do this for you, but I'm telling you right now, you're not gonna like it. There's no way I can guarantee. And then, of course, take all that logic, put it on a dad hat, and all the rules change.
Yeah.
So, because the fabric is just it moves on you so much, worse. But anyway, I'm gonna constantly in this series talk about tips on how to qualify a digitizer and how to hold them accountable for your files not being exactly what you want them to be. So
yeah, I think that's that goes in line with why we're doing this. Is there's so many things to think about. A lot of people, if they don't know about all these other things, they become more order takers. The customer says, I want an embroidered polo, or I want an embroidered hat.
Yeah.
We take the order, we do what they want, and it might have been a successful project, but when we deliver the garment to the customer, that's the beginning of that or the completion of the merchandise journey. Is it selling? Are people wearing it? Does it hold up in the wash? There's so many variables that once it leaves our hands, we don't necessarily get all that feedback. So the more we can be involved on the front end in helping guide the client, like you said, be politely opinionated and say, hey, I know you want it there. I don't think it's going to come out great. What if we actually did a woven patch? Mm-hmm. Instead, we can get smaller letters or a sublimated patch. We should be the ones guiding and making the best product for our customer. It might be, oh yeah, it's just basic embroidery, but there could be other ways to make it better and make the end wearer like it even more. So that's the biggest thing as we talk about these things of, we need to be the experts. We need to show people and guide them, because we've seen 100 times what they've seen in their life is when it comes to merchandise. So the more we learn, and more of these techniques that we're teaching people and showing people, they're going to fill their little library of embroidery, and they'll be able to take that one project that might have been boring and make it really awesome. So that's kind of some of our goals of making sure you can see it in real time. Anyone can be creative if they have enough time, but in our fast-paced industry, you need to be coming up with ideas quickly. So
right.
We want to embed all of these things to our audience, just so they can have that one client or a couple projects that they suggest something else and the customer goes for it, and then everyone raves about it. So that's our goal in all of it, is
absolutely
balancing budget and making it the best it can be.
Absolutely. And one of the key points too, I think you made too, is turn time. And so I ask all the factories out there in the shops, if you could wait an extra day to have it done right, would you? Because I would.
Yeah,
I would. Just the fact that somebody can turn a simple left chest around in 24 hours doesn't do it for me. I want to see a sew out sample. I want to see it sewn on the similar fabric that I'm going to sew it on, with similar backing I'm going to sew it on, with similar thread I'm going to sew it on. I mean, I want to see everything, because as soon as I take that file and put it in my embroidery machine, it could be the means of 30 minutes of wasting my time, or 30 minutes and I've got the first 2 runs done.
Yep.
I mean, that's a huge difference of, the best dollar for what you're doing. So that's why digitizer is very important.
And a lot of people are, I guess, the shops that do embroidery and screen printing in the same facility has that advantage of working, with each other. For the rest of us, or, sometimes we don't have that. And so how can we make sure the printer and the embroiderer work well together? Again, those having strike offs, making sure that you and your creative team are seeing it, and not just trusting your vendor, because their interests are different than your interests, right? We have a client, we want to make the best product. A lot of times manufacturers are squeezed and they need to get it out, you know. They might be okay sacrificing some quality for time. And so it's up to us, if you are a middle person or a broker or a distributor, or you're an embroiderer working with a screen print shop, you always have to be that guide and be that director of the orchestrator of everything, because all it takes is one little link in the chain to go awry, and then all that precious time to make something awesome turns out to not be working, and so it's a failure as well. So there's the aspects and approaches that people are gonna have to take to go outside of the box.
And that's a really good point too, because failure is always part of the equation. And the reality to these shops is you're going to do it. It's just part of running a shop. But the hopefully with some words of comfort I can offer is that I've been doing this for a long time. I work for several shops, big and small, and I can tell you that all shops have these problems. They have the same problems, whether on larger scale, smaller scale, they are still the same problems. How you get through those problems truly is what sets you apart from being successful and just doing the same old thing, because that's what it is. And there's nothing wrong with doing the same old thing. I know that we have a lot of customers that they're sending us several thousand left chest polos 2 or 3 times a year. We're going to take it. It's easy. It's the same stitch file. It's pretty much the same fabric. I mean, who wouldn't want a slam dunk customer like that? That's all great. But then that same customer that's been amazing and loyal for you for all these years comes to you and says, we want to do a pullover that just it's for all the the investors, or it's for a really special event, and it's got to just be something that really shows how awesome they are to us. And that's where today's podcast is directed towards, that next level. Get it up there. Stop doing the same things just because it's easy. In fact, just real quick too, Jeremy actually has some really, really good ideas on how to stay up with what's out there, so that you can pull inspiration, from a dedicated place. I know he's inspired me a great deal to use Pinterest to find this type of art and art related techniques that, Pinterest, when I first started, it just seemed like a waste of time to me, because the algorithm wasn't what it is today. And so once you start liking a few things, it really starts to flood your attention with other really great things. I'll let Jeremy talk a little bit about that.
I think before you can change things, you have to know what's out there, and that's where I'm always focusing on constantly filling your inspiration library with images, not for a specific project, but things that you like. Because a lot of times, screen printers or embroiderers, you have a certain demographic. And so while there's thousands of embroidery things out there, you want to dial it in. So the reason I use Pinterest is that I'm constantly filling it with cool techniques, different threads, different color combinations, different locations. And I'm constantly just filling my mind of what's possible. That way, when I get a live active project with my customer, I can draw from there. I can go to my Pinterest board. I have embroidery, I have applique, I have multimedia, screen printing, specialty inks, I have everything. But just on the basic side, all it takes is 3 to 4 minutes to go to your Pinterest. Even if you're doing a hat, all right, what is something different I can give this customer? They always do their name embroidered across. Cool. They've never complained. Great. Everyone wears them. Awesome. But how do you take it to the next level and secure you as a vendor that they're not going to go shop around, because they know that you're giving them everything possible when it comes to this? So starting with the inspiration, and then if you are not designing in-house, or if you're not digitizing in-house, send these images along to your embroiderer or to your digitizer so that they can see visually what you're trying to accomplish. It's difficult to talk in creative terms without visuals a lot of times, because your terminology might be different than mine. But when you have an image to say, hey, this whip stitch, and you, the digitizer, Joe, you could be like, well, that's actually a bean stitch. Oh, I
Right.
got educated. Or it
Right.
could be the same or different words for the same technique. And so the visual is what brings all of that together to say, I'm trying to achieve this look, and you learn over time to get your designer to design for that, to showcase what it's going to look like versus just a flat vector. And you get it to your digitizer and like, hey, make it chain stitch, or
Yeah. Yeah.
make it bean stitch, and
That-
they don't
this is-
necessarily even know, and you're going to go back and forth and not get
Absolutely.
something right for a while.
Absolutely. And these are great points. I think there's probably going to be an episode we have on here which is just going to be tech packs. It's just going to be what it takes to put a tech pack together for specific types of decoration techniques, because that is a huge hole in the industry. I remember when I was working for Abercrombie and Fitch, if they didn't know what a tech pack was, it was kind of like a, no deal. We're just,
It's over.
you didn't go to the right school, buddy. Sorry,
Yeah.
because it's very important that communication to your factory is top notch. And we've all heard of the golden rule: treat others the way that you want to be treated. But we exercise a lot of the platinum rule, which is treat others the way they want to be treated. And when you speak their language, it makes all the difference in the world. When you try to make people conform to your language, that's when things kind of get cross-wired, and that's when things kind of go right, especially when it's coming to factories, especially offshore factories, because they're, the majority of factories, especially offshore, are Queen's English. And I know some of you out there are like, what relevance is that to me outsourcing something? Because the majority of outsourcing is offshore. There's very little of it is in the States anymore. So that's where it's relevant, is you have to understand. And Jeremy's absolutely right. When you put accompanying images with the artwork that you're trying to do, and with inspiration attached to the artwork you're trying to do, they're like, oh, now I know what they want, regardless of what they called it. We want the purple upside down dinosaur technique, whatever it is, doesn't matter. It's been illustrated, and we can see what it needs to be. So that's a huge step in the right direction for sure.
And then on the other side, from us to the client,
yes,
what they need is very different than what the embroiderer needs, or the digitizer.
Yep.
Again, we want those visuals because most of our clients aren't going to be able to imagine it.
Right.
We want to accompany. So on some of our mock-ups, we'll do the hat with a patch or embroidery, and then we'll have a big close-up, and it's not necessarily of the design, it's a screenshot of our inspiration. This stitch that Abercrombie did, this stitch that Ralph Lauren did.
Yep.
And we've had a lot of customers elevate their garment just by us doing that. Again, I said, you want to experiment. A lot of times we've just pitched it knowing that we can do it, and then the customer gets all pumped, and then we execute it. So there's a couple approaches, but getting the customer to understand that it's different. It's not just this flat image on a flat garment. You want to give them as many visuals. One, it builds credibility that you know what you're doing, your team knows what they're doing, and you're looking out for them. You're trying to make it better. But then you don't need to get super technical with them. You need to come up with customer-friendly terminology that they're going to understand. While we're talking about bean stitch and whip stitch and pass and backing, they don't care about it. You want to use terms that they're going to be able to digest. Vintage, athletic, what's some other,
dimension. Yeah, exactly.
Preppy, depth, like words that aren't just to our industry, that they could understand, because you're going to have to talk. That's why, again, we say bridging the gap, talking with the commercial, which is our clients, and then the technical, which is our vendors.
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, this is so crucial. Like you said, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because there really is, we do have those two separate jobs we have to do. We got to talk to production. We also have to talk to the customer. So that's obviously an amazing amount of value there. And I hope that that lands with everyone really nicely, because it's, we still, and I feel like we're always learning. I've been doing this for a long time. We're always learning what's the best way to talk to both, about those scenarios. So, yeah. Okay, so the off script here. So the segment 4 here, we talked about upgrade my art. I don't have anything to really talk about. We don't really
Yeah.
need to do that
Well,
right
let's
now.
just maybe talk about what we're going to do in future episodes.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. So for all you audience listeners out there, if this particular cast hits true with you, and we've been able to reach out and really get the feels of your company, we really want you and your involvement. We're looking for techniques. Specifically, we're going to do a segment here on our show called Upgrade My Art. And basically what we're going to do is Jeremy and I are going to sit there and take a look at some submissions and see what we can do to help you take that art maybe to the next level, throw some ideas out there, and we're going to feature that in our segments moving forward. It was a little wordy for what I was trying to do, but anyway.
It's okay.
Yeah. We can chop that down a little bit if we need to.
All right. Yeah. And so I think if you have a project that you're working on, or you have a customer that is really open to new ideas, send some old artwork that they have, or send their logo and let us know what they've done in the past. That way we can say, hey, this patch would be nice for that, or you could do a single layer of felt with a chain stitch on it. We'll just come up with 2 to 3 different ideas that you could pitch to your client. In addition to, you don't have to totally get their basic embroidery out of the way. Say, hey, this is kind of what we've been doing, but here's some also cool techniques we've seen in the retail space that we could apply to your garment.
Right, exactly.
They'll really appreciate that too, even if they don't go with it.
Yep, exactly. And let's see, did we say, because I'm gonna cut this part out here, but what was the email address we were going to use? Was it media or something like that? What was that? I can't remember. That we used to start our Spotify catch-all.
Was it media? No, was it social? Social.
I'm just thinking of where they should send their submissions to. Yeah, so, oh wait, no, that was Upwork. We use social for Upwork.
I thought it was. Was it
Web?
There we
Web
go.
at Amber. Okay. All right. So everyone, if you're interested in getting that artwork upgraded, please send your submissions to web@amber.com. I'll put a banner here across the bottom so you guys know where to send it to. But we're really anxious to see what artwork you have and how to get it upgraded. We just love being able to peel back the layers and talk about what we know we can do to help with branding.
Yeah, for us, it's, I think part of our superpowers are being able to do that, of having the breadth of knowledge of all the embroidery techniques out there. I mean, I'm sure there's some that even you might not know, but for the most part, anything that's going to be within our industry, we're going to have the gist about. So we really love this part and being able to do it quickly. If we get a bunch of submissions, we'll bust out a handful every episode.
Absolutely.
We just enjoy doing that because, we think in layers when it comes to merchandise, and we want to pass on the love.
Absolutely. So speaking of love, thank you all for listening to our podcast today. This is definitely episode 1. We're going to keep growing this.
Yeah.
We're going to love to hear your feedback. And if there's anything out there we can do to help you, please don't hesitate to send a submission. Visit our website. I'll put it down here at the end of the cast as well, so you guys know how to get a hold of us and submit for the future. But thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, and if you have any coworkers or people that you think could benefit from that, we're okay with you telling them snitches get stitches. So you tell people about us and we'll share the stitch love.
Wonderful. Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. And we appreciate you joining us today.
Fashion to the people.
Fashion to the people.
Welcome to the Dudes of Thread podcast. The Dudes of Thread podcast is here to open your mind when it comes to specialty embroidery, applique, patchwork, and multimedia. From ideation to design to sourcing, we want to help you help your customers elevate their merchandise.
We've done the research, made the mistakes, and are excited to share this nerdy fashion content. Join us as we decorate our way to creativity, one stitch at a time.